Are honest endings better than happy endings? Today, you'll learn from Searit Huluf, the screenwriter and director of Self, Pixar's first CG stop-motion hybrid. Find out how Searit tackled production challenges, faced her self-sabotage tendencies, and discover why animation is a wonderful medium. And stay tuned until the end to learn a technique that will keep your audience hooked on your story. Welcome to Write for Animation. It is so great to have you here.
Yeah, so happy to do this. I watch your videos and I go to your panel. So I'm just like, oh my God, now it's my turn to be here.
That is fantastic. So let's start right away with a question from Shailene Smith. She's part of our community and she asks, what was your journey to the Sparkshorts program and what was the biggest lesson the program taught you about writing for animation?
I had advocates at Pixar. So one of them was Britta Wilson. She's the VP of Inclusion Strategies, and she's someone who I think when people are talking about potential directors, she's that person in the room that I feel like always brought up my name because I came from an unusual path where I came from prod management. So I used to be a production coordinator, but every year while I was at Pixar, and I've been in Pixar literally from yesterday, it'll be 8 years, which is like crazy, but I was just making films on the side. So I would always do live action short films. I even did like a talk show too. And I think I was just really wanting to make films. And I didn't like this idea of like waiting for my opportunity. I just kind of was like, I'm going to do it. And that's where I kind of feel like Britta and like this opportunity of like, oh, we have a spot for a Sparkshort kind of like all came. It's kind of, I think of like the opportunity came to me, but I also was ready for it in the sense I've been making films for years. And the second part of your question, I think like writing for animation is so interesting because I rewrote this script so many times. Every time I write it, like, I'm like, let me know your thoughts. And everyone's like, okay, let's do this. And then the moment you get into boards, something breaks. Like always, all the time. So I think that's like the greatest thing about it. Because in live action, you kind of just, you write it and you're on set and you kind of really discover that in the edit room. But animation, I think the beauty, and maybe sometimes the curse, is just like the constant rewriting, the constant like drafting to make the story better. That was kind of like one of the biggest lessons I learned. Like, yeah, and everything I write will translate to boards.
At the same time, you can always get better, so you can't keep on doing it forever. But it turned out fantastic, so I think it was worth all the rewrites. So you went to UCLA, you learned about screenwriting, we read books about writing. But what's something that you see in theory that it works, but then in practice is very different? Or what have you learned at Pixar?
I was a screenwriting major at UCLA, so and that was primarily for live action films. So like I've been like writing terribly in my early 20s. And I say terribly because I do truly believe in the concept of 10,000 hours. I left the program with really broken, not great scripts, but also just like a foundation, which I'm very grateful about. And then coming to Pixar, what was really great was like, because I was in the prod management side, I was mostly in the story, art, and script departments and supporting those groups. I feel like I was at film school again. I was literally watching them rewrite the movie over and over again. And even for Turning Red, like in Turning Red, I was specifically in the story department for that show, just seeing Julia and Domi turning out pages, rewriting the story. And I was also the edit coordinator. So then I'm there for the story reviews and they're like, all right, let's go to edit review. And then seeing what they did in boards to being reels and how things keep breaking. And I think what's cool about Pixar is just like the constant need of just, oh, the story could be better. Like, how can we do this? And even the brain trust sessions, like sitting into those sessions and listening to all these amazing directors talk about how to make the story better. It was great, like fly in the wall kind of moment. You go into this room with this belief of everyone here wants this to be the best film that it could be. So there's kind of like ripping up the bandage moment of like, all right, let's get into it. And I think that filmmakers really appreciate that. Obviously, it's hard to hear notes and stuff, but I think that's the thing about Pixar is just being thick-skinned to hear the notes, but also just knowing that there is a support group there, people there who want you to succeed.
Absolutely. We had Mike Jones, he was talking about it. That is a moment where egos goes on the side and everybody's trying to make a great movie. And we also had Domishi talking about the first act of the film and how she had to rewrite and rethink it multiple times. And it was a great hearing from her as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit, starting by the title of your short films. You shared that self is short for self-sabotage, right? So how do you prevent self-sabotage as a writer?
I'm constantly doing that with right now. I write a script and I spend like so many years and like so much time making it. And then I make it and show it to the world. And then you're kind of go back to square one. But then like there's this like weird, I feel like I forget how to write. So like I'm in that process right now where I'm like writing something new, like fresh, and I feel like I'm just like, oh my God, it's been ages since I've did this because I've been in production for so long. And I think for me, what has helped me is some tools that has really helped me was honestly getting a support group. Like I have a producer who I'm like, hey, can you read my stuff? Because I do think that if I don't have any advocate support groups, I think for me, like things will start going downhill. Especially since I notice that the most I self-sabotage myself is when I want something really badly, like when I really, really want something for myself, thinking about it all the time. That's when my self-sabotaging peaks in a very kind of like ironic way, where it's just I do probably the worst thing you shouldn't do. And especially for writing. Like for example, like we'll wake up like at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to write. That procrastination habit is so bad. But I kind of train myself to think that's where the juices come out. That's where the real stuff comes out. And it's just like, no, I'm just losing sleep.
Very excited because I can ask you this and you'll answer as a writer. We love to dissect a little bit what is the structure of a short film. Many of our viewers and the audience, they are starting out, they don't know where to start where writing their first short film. So what are some general advice that you could give them? But also if you could like go through the short film and tell us a little bit of what's happening at any given moment from the writing perspective.
I think all my stories start out with a journal. Like I always have like a word or a concept for all the ideas that I write. So for example, for self, I knew from the get-go, like I remember like my first page on my journal entry for this feeling I had. Because a lot of the things I write is based off a feeling I have. And oh my God, I know I want to write something about self-sabotage, but I don't know in what way or concept. And while I was writing in that journal book, I just really reminiscing my time at UCLA and making stop motion films and how I think I want this to be stop motion. I don't know how or what, but I had this journal. It's kind of like journal entries. I'll just write a lot of my thoughts and feelings into it. That's where like the ideas start flowing out because I'm very sensitive of what I call an idea versus a story because not all ideas are stories. It's just an idea. And I think it's really important to differentiate the two because if you start writing a script with an idea, which is great, and you get so excited about it, there's not a lot of texture and substance in it to help you flesh it out to a story versus like a story that has a beginning, middle, of end is something really great to have because it can help you with getting like feedback from people. Sometimes, especially in my early stages, I write this idea and I'm like, this is a terrible story. And I have to remind myself, it's still an idea, it's not a story yet. So it's fine. It should be like this.
Amazing answer. I love it.
Writing a short film can sometimes feel challenging, so I'd like to help you. Download our free PDF guide on how to write a short film in 3 acts, where we break down the building blocks of any story, making it easier for you to start writing your own. The download link is down below.
I appreciate structure because especially when I'm just starting to write out, I just have a beginning, middle, of end and just have it down. But like for self, for example, I think for the longest time, the ending was a weird issue of just like, how is this ending going to end and how is it going to make people feel? And I also want to say too, that live action filmmaking, like I think all filmmaking is collaborative, but animation is like the most collaborative. I wrote the script, but I also had like a story team and I also had like an editor and they're very involved with helping me figure out what the story structure is and what it should be. I want to just say that foremost. And then when I was writing it, I think I wrote this kind of first act, which is very, very short. I feel like the first act is literally the escalator scene. That's all it is. It was like the first minute of the film. I think I wanted to really focus on having someone come to a new city and having her feel like this, oh my God, this is amazing. And then having it quickly turn on her. So that was kind of like the goal for going from like the act 1 structure, which is like, she's so happy. And then the moment she tries to interact with people, it all goes downhill. And that's kind of like how the film goes. You see that kind of like going up pointy mountain. I think for me, I wanted that graph that just goes down, 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 down. And there's like a little boop, just because like I knew I wanted the ending to feel honest. So like act 1 was just like, okay, she gets excited and quickly everyone turns on her. And then the excitement incident is those wishing upon a star moment. I think when I was first writing the script and having the reels, I just had the body parts fall from this guy. I didn't really have any explanation towards it because I think for me, I liked the idea of like, it just happens. What happened? And Domi Shi, who's like my mentor, she was watching it. She's all like, I feel like you need a little more explaining here. I feel like you can't just have bodies fall from the ground. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, it's cool. It's funny. It makes you be like, what's going on? But then she pitched this idea of what if she's just shooting upon a star and then she's making a wish? And I was like, oh, actually, no, that's really great because it's so universal. It makes people easily grasp to it. And it's something like that's kind of understanding. Because I think for me, I'm very sensitive about painting, like just saying everything to the D. Like I do like a little mystery. I trust my audience is smart and they can figure things out. So the assignment incident is that hand coming down, and I wanted it to feel magical, but also very creepy.
I love about the moment that it also taps into this universal idea of wish upon a star and the classic idea of wanting something that usually is good for the character. In this case, something that she really needs. She wants it, but it's not gonna make her fulfilled.
I think that was the thing too, or like in Act One, especially when we're in boards and layout, I kept getting notes that we don't care. We don't care about her. We don't care that she's doing this. Like you need something to make us care. And it wasn't until we started seeing the animation test, I kid you not, like that shot of her, the escalator beat of her twisting her wrist, that when I showed the raw footage to Domi, all these people, they were like, oh my God, I love her. They're like immediately just like, I love her. And I was like,
yeah.
The power of animation.
Stop motion, it's in service of the story. And your story has also this connection between the narrative elements with the technique and the mix.
I want her character design to tell us a story about her too. So we wanted her to be made something natural with African markings on her. There's like a crest and 211s that said that she's from the Tigray region. There's also just us being resourceful because we didn't have a lot of money and budget. But it was also, again, like I think it's nice not to spill everything out. And that was another thing too, where like even when I was writing the script, I had no dialogue. Like it was like the script didn't want to talk. And I was like, maybe a narrator. So I tried to write a narration and just didn't work. So I was like, okay, it's just going to be a silent film. And we're really just going to rely, again, in animation. I feel like some directors probably have talked about this too, or like whenever they pitch something to an animation studio, they always have this question of like, why animation? And like, why use this medium and not live action? And for me, it was like, this film was like the perfect kind of like, yeah, like you're just like seeing these microaggressions. You don't need to say anything. It just happens through action.
I love that. And the touch in your chest and the sound, you were able to create basically a language that's universal. It's fantastic. And the restriction always brings to more creativity. Going back to the structure, we got to the point where you were mentioning where she starts with the body parts. Where are we there in terms of structure and the character's journey?
The whole body parts and everything are like the fun and games in the story. And I using the save the cat term. But I think it was also just I wanted the audience to have a complicated feeling about what's going on, because usually during Act Two, you're rooting for your character to do the things they want, their goals. But when you're watching someone literally rip themselves apart and changing themselves, there's a little bit of, I don't want you to, but at the same time, I know this is your want. I feel conflicted. And I think like in animation, you don't feel like a lot of those feelings. You usually like watching someone get what they want. You're like, go, go, go. And then this one is, oh, I don't know if maybe that's the right thing to do. And it's kind of scary writing a story in that kind of structure, because like you don't want the audience to get ahead of your protagonist. Right. Which is kind of like one of those big kind of like story notes of just like once they get ahead, that's when they kind of check out, because they could write the story themselves. Again, going back to the audiences are smart, but because she's so lovable and because you see the way she moves, you know what she's doing is not right. And you kind of just don't care, because you're kind of just want to see what happens. Like I want to see what happens in Act 3 with her.
And now getting to the ending, I think was very surprising, both the climax and the resolution of the film. Was it hard to write that?
I think for me, I always go for a satisfying, like honest ending, not like a happy ending, because that's just not something that reflected my life. Like I had a hard life growing up too as a child. And like for me, that's not realistic in my life. And I really like to create something more honest and not just like a fairy tale happy ending. At the end of the film, when she steps on her face, I think that for me, your face is like your number one identity. It's kind of just like, this is who you are. We see her rip herself her bodies, and it's just like, yes, that's her. But like, I think there's like a disconnect with other parts of your body except your face. And when you see her step on her face, there's this immediate just like, oh my God, that's me, you know? And I love that she steps on it, because again, going back to self-sabotage, when I self-sabotage myself and when I, again, going to that mindset, I get very narrow-minded and I'm like, I want this so bad. And then when I finally like realize that this is not the way I'm supposed to do it, I kind of realize it too late. And I have to suffer the consequences of like my actions. And I really wanted that kind of feeling for her, where she steps on her face and it's cracked and broken. And it's nice that like she does choose herself again, and she kind of goes through this period of like, this isn't right. But like, you know, at the end of the day, she's still going to have those cracks in her face that she's going to see every day. And it's going to remind her of the things that she did before.
I think it's beautiful. You also pushed the resolution and the revelation of the character until the very last moment. Want until she really is shocked by that action. I think that's great. I remember Tom Moore more he shared about the painful truth. I think you tapped into that a lot. It's truth. Even Michael learned when he was talking about Lotso, when he says something to the toys, like when you have a painful truth, if it's true, you have to put it out, right?
And I think Soul did that really well too. I remember watching Soul, and we see Joe get what he wants, but he's not happy, and I love that because it's so honest. That's how life is. So yeah.
So let's see if we get this quickly. This is from Michael Arndt. Got to talk with him, and he told me you should always ask what was the hardest part to write in the short film and what you learned from it.
Oh my God. I think it was the beginning was the hardest. That was the one where we kept on chopping up a lot in the edit. And I have to say shout out to like Scott, who is basically our story soup, and Will, who was our editor, because they even on their own were tag teaming, trying to figure out like, how can we make this beginning help set up where we're about to see in the story? Because there's a lot. And I think, again, when it comes to production, as a director, it is your responsibility to support production. And production was just like, your act one is too long. So it's just like, okay, so that was the hardest one.
That's great. So thank you so much. It was a great conversation. We'll learn a lot, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yes, I agree. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Learn how to write a short film by watching this video about Pixar's Piper, so you can start writing your own. I'm Pietro, this is Write for Animation, and I'll see you in the video.